This episode is brought to you by Mortgage Workflow Partners and the Mastering Encompass series, both for users as well as administrators. You can find out all the information about it over at masteringencompass.com. Also, if you'd like to check out what we're doing on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel using the @MasteringEncompass handle. And make sure you stay up to date on all the information, not just with podcasts, but also video content that we bring to you as often as possible. Now let's get on to the episode.
Hey everyone, Larry Bailey here with Mortgage Workflow Partners. Thanks everybody for coming today. Today is really cool. It's November 12th, 2024, and we're getting together as a community. Thanks everybody for showing up. We're going to give everyone a chance to get in before I get rolling too heavy. I hope everybody's doing well. Has anybody, show of hands for those that are in here yet, has anybody actually had a chance to start going through all the release notes? We know that we've got version 24.3 rolling into our production environments on December 9th as of right now. But they are in test environments. So if you've got a test environment, you should be seeing 24.3.0.0 in your test environment. We're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about seeing version 24.3 in your Encompass web and why you can't see it, although it looks like you can see it. For those that are just coming in today, thanks very much. We usually start these around 4 o'clock Eastern. And here we go. So 24.3 coming out. I actually had a chance to go through all of the release notes. We should be dropping those recordings here soon online, so check out those replays at your leisure. I also shot today the first half of Encompass Web Review. Truly phenomenal stuff. Like, again, I don't know if anybody else, show of hands, if anybody else wants to talk about this besides me, but has anybody had a chance to go through all the release notes? Even if it's just a summary review, go through those release notes for desktop or for web. And if you have, I'm curious to see what you think is most impactful for you. I'm going to talk about them. I'm going to put my glasses on because I can't read without them. Luba says you scan them. So Luba, you scan them in your scanner, or you topically scan them. Yeah, and that's pretty much what we do. So the whole reason why I do these release notes review, it's cathartic for a couple of things. First of all, it's an obligation that I've made to myself to make sure I actually read the release notes. I think historically speaking, as an admin, you have very little time. It's a dry read, right? If you're not an Encompass fanatic, it's a dry read. Number one. Number two, what do you do with all the information? There's plenty of companies that basically regurgitate the print over and over again. And I decided a long time ago, that wasn't my thing. I actually want to read it out loud, and mostly I want to interject my viewpoints as far as what's going on. So having said that, for those that are just coming in, we're going to go over 24.3. These are the things that I thought that I would pay attention to if I had my own company. We support about 30 companies across the country in all channels, both retail and non-retail, as well as some other groups that are outside the lending industry directly. They are support teams of other lenders. So we're actually teaching the teachers, which is kind of cool. And what I found in desktop, I don't know if you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked about this in a group setting where I said my biggest concern is going to be the fact that you're going to be able to launch Encompass Web from desktop, and that was my number one concern. And I was right. It's still my number one concern. So I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a moment. Candace says, I saw something about they were changing how 5016 functions. Yes. So what's happening is if you've got 5016 in your reporting database, you're going to want to pull that out after December 7th, because that way you can have a native column in your pipeline views, both for desktop and for web, to show if that loan file is included in archive or not. So Candace, yeah, you'll definitely want to follow that up and see what's going on. So in the release notes, I'm always going to tell you that it's easiest to go to changelog, but there's a lot of information here on screen. Listen, gang, lot comparison tool, only applicable if you're using ePPS. So if you're not using ePPS, this is not important to you today. Launching web version from Encompass, of Encompass from desktop version, I'm going to show you that. And I'm going to tell you what you should do about that. If you're using field analyzers, that kind of thing, great. There's some updated information. There's a lot of ULDD updates. So make sure if you're like, oh yeah, thanks, Candace. Yeah, if I said ePPS, I meant ICE PPE. Thanks for correcting me. So there's a lot of updates to ULDD. There's also some call out fields for Freddie and Fannie changes. So just as a reminder, if you ever see FRE, that's Freddie Mac versus FNMA for Fannie. There's also some other updates for verification of additional loans. That's your VOAL. That's important if you're closing a second lien or a third lien, whether it's from yourself or from somebody else. Rep and Warrant Tracker got some updates. That's really cool to check out. New fields added. If you're doing manufactured housing, you've got a new checkbox to make sure that you're indicating that the mobile home was converted to real property. And that's an important delivery item for your GSEs, that kind of a thing. Some EDM stuff. This actually I saw on one of the threads, another forum, that some folks were upset because they want to see the file sizes to know when they're sending things. I'm not quite sure what they're doing with that and where they're having trouble, but file size is going to change. Document conversion setting. I've been telling you probably, I don't know, 10 years, 12 years. Make sure you always have your conversion set to view original and set it to color. Now you don't have a choice. Now it's going to be set to that. And that's just because it needs to have that setting to make sure a web version works properly. And there's a whole bunch of fixed issues. So desktop is cool. There's some updates. Definitely go through them. I want to show you what that open looks like. And so when you go into Encompass, you guys are seeing my screen okay, right? Give me a thumbs up. Just want to make sure everything is going smoothly for you. So when you go, thanks, Luca. So when you go in, thanks, Danielle. When you go into Encompass and you've saved the file, you'll get this little open web view. This is one of the areas that is new. And when you click that, you'll get a call out. Do you want to save changes or not? I'm just going to click no. And what's going to happen is it's going to close Encompass and it's going to open up that loan file. Voila, you're in Encompass Web. Naturally, if you've got super admin, this is going to happen for you, no problems. But if you've got a persona, a non-super, you might want to consider checking those settings, and you may want to consider, until you're ready for them to be in Encompass Web, you may want to consider going to your persona, and you may want to consider moving that radio button to desktop only. Now, I talked to a POS provider, and apparently their configuration requires you to have this radio button selected. It's kind of problematic because even if you go into the web version of the persona, you can certainly make sure this isn't checked, but this isn't everything. And so you may have to work, you may want to work into your web settings, specifically when you go into the waffle, go into admin. You may want to go into company user setup, and you may want to go to loan left nav, and you may want to create a new template, and you may want to turn all these off if you don't want them to be able to really function. If you can't disable that radio button, meaning if you can't put that radio button on just desktop. So that's an option of kind of how to shut the whole thing down. I still don't know if this is going to work for you, but this is certainly something that you can test for that part. So there's the one way you can get into a loan. And by the way, guess what you can also do? And your users can also do. Here they're in this loan. Discharges changes. And I'm going to go over into this loan. Here's that loan. They can go over in here into this loan. You guys catching my drift? This is a big concern from a workflow perspective. When you've got folks who can open up multiple loans across multiple tabs, Two things are probably going through your mind, or as you're watching this, you're going through your mind. A, you're like, oh, how cool is that? We can open up multiple loans at the same time. Or B, holy crap, they can open up multiple loans at the same time, which means they can minimize that sucker. They can leave those loans open. And sure enough, if you look at the pipeline view, you'll see all these loans are open by me. So, yeah. So something to think about, something to make sure you've got figured out. Because you want to make sure that when you're developing your workflow that this. So Chris says, we already have people doing that. They sign into multiple Encompass instances. A little bit different, Chris. Although I like the way you're thinking. They open up multiple instances of Encompass because they want to make sure that as they're in a file, they also can open up another loan file to go figure something out. Having two Encompasses open on two different screens, believe it or not, from a workflow, they tend to remember to close those loans. My concern for here, and again, this is just me, my concern is they have different tabs. And if you're like me, I can have a bunch of browsers open at the same time. It's a lot easier to forget. That's my call out. So just something to think about and work through, right? And that doesn't mean it's the end of the world. It just means it's something to think about, work through. Kirsten says we have someone that occupies 4 files at once every morning on desktop. What will they do on web? Wait. Someone that occupies 4 files at once every morning in desktop on the same desktop, Kirsten, I'd like to know how they do that. You know, how they can go into one desktop session and open up 4 different files all at the same time. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding you. Chris says, would web time them out? I don't have anything that calls for a timeout. Yeah, Chris, I'm not sure. So web, in terms of Libby just adds web kicks them out after 5 minutes or something. That's on the admin. I haven't actually seen web log me out after 5 minutes in the loan file. Kristen says, yeah, the team member opens up her files in 4 different instances so no one can get into them. Yeah, I mean, that's what's wild. I'd love to understand that workflow better, to understand that. In any event, that's what they could do from opening desktop. That's the whole reason for me sharing this with you. Something else that happens when you're in a file that's really cool is if you go to AUS tracking, you now have this open underwriting center. Super fancy, allows you to open up the file, drops you right in underwriting center so that your teams can actually leverage dual AUS. If you've got that enabled, you can also see rep and warrant tracker, and you can also do early check LQA right from here. Something else that's supported in 24.3 that's not here yet is the ability to run DO. So this is going to say DU/DO. Yes, I'm in testing environment, but keep in mind, even though it says testing environment, if you click about, you'll see the client version is still 24.2. So supposedly ICE is going to give us the ability to get into TEBE on the web sometime next year. We'll see when that gets delivered to us. But for now, keep in mind that web is still on 24.2, which is why we don't see a lot of the web version settings that I think you're going to be excited about. I'm just an Encompass geek, so I get excited about a lot of these things. On the web lock comparison tool, and you've got the Encompass pipeline updates that we see in desktop. In desktop review that I posted, or will be posted soon, I spent a lot of time going through a lot of these enhancements in desktop, so I'd probably encourage you to do that. I spend much less time in the web version overview with things that are already in desktop, just so I don't bore people. The things that are interesting in web that you have are things like a new appraisal management tool. This thing looks really cool. The fact that you can download the XML directly from here might be something that's interesting to you. So that's something that's a standout. Some of the other things that are happening in here are the ability to sort and search options for schedulers. So for those of you that are really digging into the scheduler, You have the ability to search and sort for them to see how much time is left, when this started, and when it's due to be completed. That's a new UI that should be very interesting to manage and to work with. So that's pretty cool. Some other things that were happening in web. I'm just going to scroll down. Watch your eyes, gang. Sorry. A lot of these things are the same in desktop as in web. Something else that stood out was the ability to get down in here. That's the MFI AMI. By the way, is everybody turned on Home Counselor automation and admin tools, or are you still using a third-party plugin? Hopefully you're turning it on. Luba, go turn that on already. What are you waiting for? Turned on, cool. Admin tools, excellent, 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 excellent. So if you haven't turned that on yet, you should. Kevin, you're definitely going to want to, my opinion, unwind third party. There's honestly no need for it anymore. If you can think of a need, you and Kelly both, Kevin, if you can think of a need for me as to why you want to keep using third party for home counselor automation, I'd love to understand it better. So please let me know. If you're using a third-party platform, I do want to call this out. This again is both in desktop, but it's called out in web here on screen. So if you're using a third party to deliver your documents, the call out here is that you no longer have like all these bridges and all this extra technology to work properly with disclosure tracking. That's all out. So what I've been saying is I talk about making it open for Encompass, open for everybody. This is the walk. So definitely work with your partners. If you're using something other than Consumer Connect to deliver your disclosures, they now have with 24.3 a wide open door to interact with Encompass as it's meant to be interacted with. So no extra work, no extra excuses. I came across, for those that use Flowify, I'm calling them out because I'm upset on behalf of a client. I just found out that when they use their Flowify instance, whatever instance that is, the method that Flowify puts, the data that they put into disclosure tracking is just wrong, just flat out wrong. And the client's getting some friction on getting that fixed. So I haven't seen that with all Flowify instances. It's maybe just them, but it's still a third party, and that hindrance, whatever it might have been in the past, should be relieved now. Kevin asked, has ICE updated it to pull within 30 days of disclosure? I don't know what that is. That sounds like a compliance question. Typically, Home Counselor is pulled. Oh, you mean the database? Oh, Kevin, that's right. You had this whole thing where you dug in and you found that the source of the information wasn't meeting your compliance findings and what your company supports. So yeah, maybe that's a reason why you can't use it. For other people that basically allow ICE to give reps and warrants on the disclosures to be leveraged, just so you know, Kevin, those other companies rely on ICE's rep and warrants. I totally appreciate and respect that your company doesn't, which is why maybe a reason you have to use third-party tech. It's a good one. But I don't know. You have the open case, so you'd probably be able to tell me better than I could tell you. So EDM is a big one. Speaking of electronic document management, there are a slew of updates, pardon me, in Encompass Web on the e-folder. Gang, go to page 58 and just grab a beverage and sit back and read and understand this. There are a ton of UI changes. So if you were like me and you had clients, or not clients, but you had team members who were kind of, yeah, that's not ready for me because of the way the e-folder worked, they're going to maybe change their tune. This was a cool call out for me. When have you ever seen the word Mac on release notes? I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. Keep in mind, this is any OS, right? If you have a computer running Linux, if it can open up in the web, you can use a Linux computer, technically, running Encompass. go over all these release notes, please, starting with page 58 as it relates to the eFolder. There are a ton of updates with regards to how things happen. This also got me wondering about how good document training is. Is anyone using document training in your daily driver? I have, I think, maybe one or two client projects that are doing it. I didn't even realize they were doing it till they told me. And naturally, if you don't know what this is Encompass's attempt um, to understand what's actually happening in Encompass with regards to the document image. So when you click auto assign, not only does it look at the QR codes on the form, but it actually looks at the image. So there's some hit or misses. Kathleen Hagen says they train documents. Kathleen Kennedy says they've used it. I'm with Jolene. I've tried it a year ago, but it never worked out well. And Candace too. So this might get me to try it again. I mean, hell, listen, we know things are the same for W-2s, for other things, tax returns. It's worth a shot. You can now sort and search options for conditions. So again, this is all on web, right? You have the ability to search within there. So if you're using a third-party tool, I know there's third-party tools that basically put search options in the desktop UI. This is an alternative. So now you can have this natively on web. Selecting multiple documents at once, creating and adding new document folders when moving a file, having the ability to pin a document folder for easy access. So what this makes me think of is we always use asterisks, right? Some kind of special character in the document name so it sits on top when we sort. Well, now you can just pin, they use folder, which makes me laugh, but they can pin a document, or delete a document. They're using folder actions. I don't know when that naming convention changed, but here it is. So I guess I got to deal with it. And then when you come into unassigned files, you can also pin them over here. So that's what that looks like. So that's pretty cool. Again, it's different UI. You've got now move to folder. List now mirrors document stacking orders properly. So if you try to do that, that's been fixed. And again, I can go on and on, gang. Definitely check this out. I'm already down to page 67 and I'm still going on eFolder. The ability to resize columns. This is consistent with desktop where there are columns removed. So if you have users that have document views using any one of these six items, they're going to be gone after 24.3. So not sure how you would know unless it's something that you know, but it's going to go away. Luba asks, do you know if there's a way to have the persona to only have import Nismo functionality in web and nothing else? Import. What are the other choices on web, Luba? Not quite sure what you mean. You're talking about creating a new file from import? Give me some more context, please. Importing. I don't know. So if you mean you come over here, let's go back to pipeline. You want to create a new loan from here. We only want them to import but not edit loans. Oh, I don't know. You'll have to educate me more on that. So when you come over here, you're talking about import, but you don't want them to create new loans? Help me out on that one. I don't know. I haven't gone through that workflow, but definitely a good takeaway. I don't think it's possible. Importing is editing. Oh, you want them to import a loan, but then no longer edit once it's imported? Luba? Why? Like, what's the use case? You'll have to explain that one to me. So they've got the 3.4, which by the way, they could edit on their own, but they've got the 3.4, they can import it in your Encompass, but the moment they import it, you don't want them to edit it. Definitely explain that one. I'd love to understand that better, because obviously I'm not getting it. Last thing on here is a couple things. You got a slide out panel that you can manage on web. Also, filters persist now when switching eFolder views. So if you have multiple eFolder document views, if you've got filters on that, it was a very annoying that they would just disappear on you every time you switched. That now stays persistent. And if you're using eClose, this is an option. Yeah, I mean, Candace threw in the chat, Luba, maybe something that might work. I have some other ideas for you too. All right, so here's the deal. Luba says we're doing a broker channel that the broker may have their own POS, and we want to. Wait, that's TPO Connect. What do you mean you're doing a broker channel? What are you trying to do, like a cheat? Like you don't want to use TPO Connect, but you want to bring in. Well, so I'm going to speak to this for a second. So this is a good example, Luba. I have some ideas which I'll take offline because let's just talk directly because there's some things you're going to have to try. If you're using Encompass in a way that is not how it's intended, great. If it's working out for you, wonderful. If all of a sudden now it creates a problem, it's not Encompass's fault. I do want to go over one thing on here because that's not the way you use that channel, and it's going to provide for some impacts. When we go through channel options, brokered here is when you're creating the 1003, but somebody else is lending. If you want to do anything, Luba, just do banked wholesale and create the loan for them. And that's going to be for them. You can do some fancy stuff. I can tell you what I've done for other companies using organizational hierarchy and some user groups to deal with this. But you definitely want to give that channel to be banked wholesale, because what you don't want to have happen is you want to be able to show them as the broker, not you. You're the lender. So even though you don't want to use TPO Connect, I totally get it, but you want to use banked wholesale for that channel option. And then, like I said, there's some other ideas I can share with you and some ways to get through Encompass to where you're not using TPO Connect, but you can use Encompass Web. I can go over these details with you. This concept is also used for JVs. Also used for loan officers who have trouble and using Encompass Desktop. I can go through those theories with you a little bit if you want, but definitely please use banked wholesale, not brokered. Okay, gang. This is about where I got to on the first part of the review. I want to leave you with a couple of things. Huge change. Everybody knows you could only ever write the e-disclosure button in field data entry. It was the only button you could control in field data entry. Well, guess what? With 24.3, administrators can now set up persona access to fields and persona access to loan actions business rules for the e-disclosure button. It was always with the closing and audit buttons. The e-disclosure is the call out. So if you have any, like we all do, field data entry rules for the e-disclosure button, you now have the ability to leverage persona access to fields business rules like you can with every other button. So Jill says we've been able to do this already. We have rules around them today. That's cool. That was an undisclosed or non-announced feature update. So Jill, I'm glad to hear that you've already using it and it works successfully, which is great. For everyone else, there's the news. That's just coming out in this release. There's some settings updates. Again, we're still on web, but there's all kinds of settings updates with regards to persona settings in the file context tool. Read through these. Watch for my updates. I'm going to walk you through the rest of this. Basically, the first part is here. The second part's going to be going through Encompass settings and then getting into the stuff that's been fixed. This is a lot. It took me about 30 minutes to talk through the first 70 pages. So to give you some sense of what's happening, there's typically an admin checklist. Keep an eye out for that. As that gets published, I will push that to you. And so you can leverage that. And if you find stuff that you think is neat to share, please use the community. Share it. That's what it's there for. Any final questions before we call it a day on this, going over the major, what's coming to you for 24.3. If you have anything that you want to talk about, post it on the community. If you find anything cool, please share it. And otherwise, hope you guys have a super awesome day. And appreciate you coming to the live show. And thanks for the feedback. Jill to know that it's been working well. Appreciate that. And for everybody else, we'll see you out there. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.